Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am Danielle Dygert. I'm here with Art Center Sarasota, and tonight we're featuring an artist from Monroe, Louisiana, Vitus Shell. So thank you so much for being here with me.
Hello, everybody.
And you're in your studio, right? Right now?
Yeah, I'm in my studio. Yeah,
Perfect. And so you work primarily out of Monroe.
yeah.
Okay.
I do. So I do a lot of residencies and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I can say for the last maybe 18 months, I've done residency. So I
Wow.
was in yeah, I was at Anderson Ranch at the beginning of the year, beginning of last year, and that's in Colorado. Um, I was in Memphis at the Crosstowns art art residency for the last 3 months of last year, and then at the beginning of this year, I did the Golden Foundation residency, and I was supposed to be at another residency, but with everything happening, everybody shut everything down, trying to for safety for the artists and everybody else. So
Yeah, I mean, understandably, but but it sounds like you had a nice streak going. When you do your residencies, are you working on a body of work that you've already been kind of creating, or is there something that happens when you visit a new town, new city, anything site specific? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it depends. So each time it just depends on what's going on. When I did the Beamers in 2018, and Beamers was more like me kind of getting a feel of what was going on in Omaha, and me me being who I am. I like to visit communities that look like communities where I come from. So I visited North Omaha, which is where Malcolm X was born,
Okay.
and it's really like a lot of rich history in North Omaha, and but North Omaha is also going through what most communities that look like the community I come from are going through, and that's like really trying to figure out what direction it's going in, with a lot of people moving out of the community and a lot of poverty being in those communities. But I really like when I go to places like that, I like going to the barbershop because that's where you're gonna get like all the juice. That's the first place you go. You get your hair cut and you sit in and see what the community kind of like had going on. And then those people kind of like let you know, like, yo, you need to check out this place and that place. So a lot of times when I do residencies, I like doing stuff like that, like really getting to know the people in the community, because that's what my work is about too. It's about people. It's about community. It's about um, how the old has affected the new. So when I go into communities, I'm really trying to learn a lot. So each time I do a residency, it just depends on where I am. This the last year I was working on work for my show that's in Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
So I did an artist call, I did a model call in Lafayette for that show. Got to know Lafayette, moving around Lafayette. And that's Lafayette, Louisiana. Um, so during the last two residencies I was doing, I was making work for that show. So it just depends on where I am.
Yeah. Well, can you actually? That's one of my questions for you. Can you elaborate on your models? Well, actually, let's take it one step back and just kind of get a general idea of what your work is. You said you talk about people in the community, but if you could give us, for someone who hasn't seen your work yet, um,
Yeah.
just a
So
general
so
idea.
so my work is figurative based. So I'm doing portraits, and my portraits, when I'm thinking about doing my portraits, I'm thinking about the history of portraiture, and how the black body kind of fits into that conversation. And in that, because the black body, uh, uh, like most minorities, were not included in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about that when I make my work. I'm thinking about the agency that I give the people that model for me, because I really like them to figure out what they want to do, come up with their own poses. Um, so all of that stuff is kind of like playing around with what I'm doing. But also, like, my work is simply, it's about the black experience. It's about the me being I guess more like the 80s and the 90s baby. I grew up during those years with hip hop, um, and how being from the South and how um, a lot of the history of being from the South kind of affects who we are today and how hip hop even is today. And I call it like slim proism because of Jim Crow mixed with
Right.
hip hop. So it's slim proism. It's about the effects of the Jim Crow on modern day black folk, pretty much. So I like playing around with that. I like using a lot of um, things from music, from hip hop songs. I like talking to grandmothers. I like talking to aunties. I like talking to people like that just to get stories and understand like how closely can like hip hop is to the blues and to jazz and to all these other things that came before. It's just a more contemporary version of that
Hmm.
music when you really start breaking it down. So I like playing around with that type of stuff because I'm trying to make bridges between the old and the new, and I feel like that's a part of the breakdown in communities is that the old folks don't want to deal with the young folks because the young folks won't listen and they doing something totally different, but in actuality they actually doing the same thing that the older generation did. It's just a little different. The
Yeah,
language might be different, the way they dress might be different, but it's a lot of similarities in that history. So, um,
yeah, no, I kind of
yeah,
love
so
that
that's what I like
bridging
to
the
do.
gap, yeah, between the two.
Yeah,
So let's keep talking about your work and specifically kind of the role of the models historically, right? And so you mentioned you're
hmm
bringing the old and the new. And let's just kind of go through a couple of your images. I'm going to do a screen share here, and maybe you can just point out, because I think you mentioned that you also work on portraits of family members, not only,
hmm
kind of found models too. So let's see if I can get that screen share going on.
And I feel like even when I do the found models, I do it. I talk to them a lot. I really try to get to know them. So it's just not like I'm just painting this person that I've never met. Yeah, so I like to really talk to the models and really get to know them, ask them all kinds of questions just to like really understand who they are. So
Can you see? You can
I
see
think
this,
they
right?
become family.
They
Say it
become
again.
family. I like that. Can you see the
Yeah,
screen share on for your
yeah, I
website?
can.
Perfect. I like that they become family in the studio. I do portraiture as well, and there's just such a kind of intimacy that you get by having a model relax and kind of open up because it really is
Right,
just you and them speaking, which is fantastic.
right.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of start here. This is the first series on your website here, so I'll just flip through. Were these people from Monroe? Were these part of any of the other projects?
Yeah, so these models, all the models in the series that you're clicking on now, were from New Orleans. I
Mm-hmm.
did the Joan Mitchell residency in 2013, and I did a local call for models, and the colleges were the ones that it's two HBCUs there, historical Black colleges,
Mm-hmm.
and they were the ones that kind of like got me models, and most of the models in these works are student models,
Cool.
and some of them had were from they were in the art department, but they were from all over the place, and it was kind of real. It was fun, like working with them because I was getting to know these kids coming that were coming from Houston and from Milwaukee and all over the place, that participated in the project. So
Mm-hmm.
I really like this project. The one that had the red on, that was I love that piece too.
This one
But yeah,
here.
her,
This
yeah,
is
she
fantastic.
was,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean.
her. You could see so much of her character.
Mm-hmm.
She was, she was real. She had a lot of character, a lot of charisma and everything.
Mm-hmm. This is actually a really large work too, 36 by 70.
hmm
And so for everyone who's watching out there, you also do large scale murals as public
Right,
projects too. So
right. And I
you're
think the
kind of
mural.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the murals have opened doors to for me thinking about larger and larger paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and a lot of times, dictate the space kind of dictate how big my paintings can be. But I've been buying larger canvases. I usually work on unstretched canvas because it's an untraditional way of thinking about hanging art. Um, it kind of mirrors the whole idea of a poster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I like playing around with that in my works
Does
too.
it look like it's?
I use grommets in the corners.
Mm-hmm. I think my internet is just not as fast as I want it to be. Oh, but there's you working in the studio too on one of these. Yeah. So yeah. And you collage too, right? So where are you
Yeah,
pulling
I
that
do.
collage
So
from?
yeah, I do a lot of collaging, and I think that's influenced by my graphic design background.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do. While I was in school, I went to Memphis College of Art, and be- because it was a brand new environment for me to be able to work in all different fields of art. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to take advantage of that time while I was there. So while I was there, I did mostly everything that was there: photography, sculpture, printmaking, computer, graphic design, digital art. Um, I do
And
a little bit of everything
and
while I
what
was there.
pushed you in this direction then? Or
Yeah. So
did it take time for that to evolve?
yeah, it did take time, but um, I think the fact that I do graphic design, like when I graduated college, I worked at a frame shop, and then my next job was as a graphic designer. And then I started from there. I've still been doing a lot of graphic design, so I do a lot of party flyers. I do a lot of CD covers and logos and things like that. So I think when you look at my art, you can also see the influence of me doing these collage backgrounds, me painting on paper, cutting the images out, moving them around, me using this pink foam that I cut out and I print on top of the
Mm-hmm.
images and whatever. So I think all of those things are kind of like evident when you see my work. This this computer work translates into my paintings or whatever.
Right.
So when I talk to students and young artists, I'm always really encouraging them to really think about everything that they do and how that translate into the art that they would want to make. You not separating the two. Thinking like, how can this become this thing also, or this could be incorporated into this thing also. So
Right,
I'm
yeah,
always,
I've heard a lot about that lately about kind of being authentic to all of your interests and including them all
right,
together in whatever you're
right,
creating. Yeah.
right. And I
And
think that's also too with the hip hop music, like
yeah.
it becomes a
Mhm.
part of this thing that I'm also doing, and I'm also trying to help people understand, like, you know, what this music, how important this music is, because of the commercial part of it, it becomes disposable. But in actuality, I think these artists are really um, talking about what's going on now, and they're
Mhm.
documenting what's going on now. If it's talking about bling bling, it's talking about this capitalism, part of the culture that people buy into, commercialism,
Mhm.
consumerism, and all of that. Like, um, so I think it's sad that it does become disposable. One year, Ludacris is hot, and then the next year you don't know, Ludacris is nowhere to be found.
Mhm.
Right? He just had a song or album that sold millions of records, and then the next year it's not even relevant anymore. But I think in the music, what's made, I think it's just as important as when you read books. Um, and if you're talking about Iceberg Slim and the pimp books he was writing about a certain time, a certain subculture that existed that people didn't know much about, and he wrote about that whole culture,
Mhm.
and it became important for a lot of reasons. It documented this culture, now it's something that we can look back and appreciate. And I think it's the same thing with hip hop. I think we have to do a better job at appreciating the hip hop and um, dissecting it and talking about it for what it is. And of course, like anything else, it's gonna have its problematic parts,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's gonna have its things that have like a lot of meat that we can look back and reflect on later. So
Yeah,
I,
absolutely. I mean, I personally love work that is both kind of documentary and contemporary too. So that's
right.
really, it goes hand in hand with what you're actually creating, you know. And how long does it kind of take you to make a body of work as well? I know that's a weird question to ask, but like how soon
Yeah,
after does this
well,
happen?
as an artist, that's kind of like up in the air. It depends on what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. So last year, I just talked about the show that's in Lafayette. I produced 17 pieces over the course of a year, and some of them are huge pieces. Um, and I think, even with that body of work, I could have done more work, but, time and taking in what's going on, reflecting on the work a little bit, so
Mm-hmm.
it just depends on really. It could take me 2 weeks to produce a piece. It could take me 2 days to produce a piece. So yeah,
Yeah.
it just depends, size, you know, if my auntie is calling me about
Some
taking her
family
to
matters. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
some family business and stuff like that. So it just depends.
Your video interviews, and some of the words that stuck out in terms of what you're trying to maybe bring light to or discuss are the hypersexual or hyper violent perceptions of what it means to be black in America. And so we just looked at your work, and initially when you look at it, I think there's a lot of iconography, right? Because you've got those kind of halo shapes around the figures. They're
Right.
they're taking up the space as much as anything else. So could you touch on kind of where maybe just how you're discussing that in your work, like where it starts to a conversation.
Yeah, I guess to still that goes back to the whole idea of this history of portraiture and who who was being who could participate in portraiture, and mostly it was churches who had the money, or kings, or people
Mm-hmm.
of royalty that could afford that, to be a part of that. So with the portraiture that I'm doing, I'm taking everyday people and putting them into that conversation of who's important and who's not. I like I like blurring out that line between high end and low end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also a thing of me playing around with the graphic design elements in paintings, right? Me taking graffiti and some graffiti elements and putting it into paintings, right? It's about blurring that line between low art, high art. And I like playing around with that when it comes to even portraitures, like, using high things that we, we, we think of as might maybe something that we would see in a cathedral in a church,
Mm-hmm.
um, and using it in a painting. So I like playing around with that thing too, because I think that's dealing with class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, and especially in like in the black community where class seems to be closer. It's not this super high end thing. It's more like a closer class thing, because somebody who might be a basketball player that might make a lot of money, they might be two people down from this person that's dirt poor. So this whole thing of class is smaller, so I like playing around with class when it comes to um, even in that thing. And I think another thing, like I mentioned Ludacris, like I like the way Ludacris like made, well, when he was making music,
Mm-hmm.
how he thought about music. He would be driving down the street and something could influence a song, So, and then he might drive the next day, and a totally different song might come out of that drive. And I think like for my work, it's kind of like that too. I'm thinking about these things that happen daily, and sometimes for me, it's not like this instant thing. It's kind of like this thing that happened. It takes me a little time to process. Like this whole thing that's going on in the country now, it's taking me more time. I have to process it and see how does that feel to me and what comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. No, and I want to bring up, I saw a project that you were doing for the Moon Pie Project, and it was a mural that you had done called Protect Her. So that was in 2016. So a couple years ago now. But can you talk about that piece? I think that's a good one.
That was influenced by, I think it was the Beyonce album, but it was Malcolm X talking on the Beyonce album about Black women being the least protected person, and I wanted to make something around in that conversation.
And what do you mean by least protected? Just for anyone who's not, or who's just chiming in,
I guess just being the last person to be a part of any conversation when it comes to sexual abuse, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to just anything, like any kind of conversations about I guess violence to the body. And I think that's the last part of it. The last people that get to protect, be talked about. But it's interesting because historically they've been the people to support everybody, as much as they can, So I wanted to make something to be a part of that conversation, and show my solidarity in that fight,
And that was done as an exterior mural. In what part of the city? I mean, is it a high traffic area?
That was in. I had a friend that's he's a street artist, and he started working with Crosstown Arts in Memphis, and it was a part of a way for the Crosstown organization to bridge the gap between them and the community that they started the Crosstown, the whole Crosstown project in. So he started that, and he invited me to come out and do that. I think he invited me in 2015, and it happened.
A year
was
later.
It 2016? I think. I can't remember what year it even happened. He might have invited me like a year before, and it happened a year later.
So, and along those lines, who's your audience, right? We talked about this on the phone call the other day, but who kind of needs to see your work, who you wish to see your work, who you want to understand your work, the kind of that discussion.
I've never really, I've never answered the whole question of that, the who all I want to see it. But I do know that I think about my mother, I think about my cousins coming to my art show, and if they can, get what I'm doing, because they don't come from a art background. So I think it's important for them, for my mom and auntie and cousins, and people that look like them that don't come from that background, that might feel awkward going into these spaces. So I feel like it's important for them to be able to come and see my work and be able to appreciate something about it, even if they don't understand the whole context of it. At least they can see, and that's another reason I like using portraiture. Because that's one thing that most people can identify with, and I think I still, with that whole ideal of low and high, I like playing around with people that don't come from academia, being able to come to the show and appreciate the work, and people from academia being able to come to the show and see the work and understand, break it down. And
in terms of the historical and contemporary context, yeah. I just want to say hi to everyone who's listening out there real quick. I just I saw a comment here, asked if you could turn your volume up, so I don't know if you could speak any louder for us, but Means we can hear you. I'm having trouble seeing those other comments here. Let me try this real quick. But thank you guys all for joining us. I just want to give a shout out. I put your website in the comment section of this. So Karen Perkins says hello from Phoenix. So great. I love this this kind of happening everywhere. If you guys have questions and comments, please put them there, and we'll refer to those throughout. I'm also going to put a couple of the links to the videos that I saw on you and your work, especially that Protect Her mural, because you talk about it, and there's some young children running in the background. Who are they? Were they just...
So when I'm originally from Monroe, but Memphis became my second home.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like family, like my play family that's there, and they always come out to all my events and kind of support. So that was one of my sisters from Memphis.
Okay.
And her kids. So they came out, and they were hanging out, and it was fun. Yeah. It was kind of like sprinkling that day. It was kind of like a crazy day to be painting. It was sprinkling a little bit, mm-hmm. but it was still kind of happening. So it was fun. Yeah.
It was just a great little snippet on you and how you work, and the fact that there's young ones running around. And there was a comment, kind of, we just heard it, where there's I would say young teen who was like, I like what you're doing, and you're like, thanks, like. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So I think that's important. I just think it's super important that I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now. It just went up for a second.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I think it's important that people that look like me see me, they can be like, this is something that I can do too. Like, I don't want kids that come from the hood to only think that they can only do basketball or rap or, some other things that they might not have the ability to do. But as an artist, anybody can do art. You don't have to be wealthy to be able to participate in making art. Because that's the way I came up. I was poor. We didn't have much. But I started, I would draw little things, and it just turned to me just doing it, wanting to do it more and more, and being identified as that person, kind of like really, I concreted the thing that I want to be, not just good at, I want to be the best at doing it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that was one of my questions too, was kind of how you got started, and it sounds like you had an affinity towards it, and if you've got that competitive streak, I could see if, any appreciation would fuel.
So I grew up in the projects in Monroe, and the projects that I grew up in were pretty bad projects, and considered in Monroe, they considered pretty bad. So my first art show was in my bedroom in my apartment complex where we live. And I took all the stuff that was on the wall. I can't remember really what was on the wall, mm-hmm. but I took all that stuff down, and I put my own work up, and then I put a sign on the front door saying drawings for sale. So that was.
Did you sell anything that day?
No.
But you got started.
Yeah. I might have been like 8, 10 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. A true business artist, right? That's amazing. Yeah. So let's go back into kind of just some questions on has your work evolved since you started, right, professionally? Has it evolved? In what ways has it evolved? And kind of, do you see it going anywhere next? You're talking about the murals kind of have changed in terms of the scale of your work, right? So you're starting to work larger. Do you want to do more of those public projects? You're having a show with us. Yes. So you're still showing in galleries and in museums, but where kind of where did it start? Where is it at now, and where do you see it going?
So I can start. Let's start when I in 2000. So I graduated from Memphis College of Art in 2000, and decided to go to grad school in 2005. Between 2000 and 2005, I stopped working, started working for myself. I was a part of an artist collective. The artist collective became another form of education. It was a nurturing environment. We would critique each other's work. We would, learn a little bit from each other. and we started having our own shows outside of the traditional spaces. And in that, um, this I started pushing my work, and I started showing around the country. Um, but in 2005, I had a show at Southside Gallery in Oxford, Mississippi, and one of my undergrad teachers was there, and she taught at Ole Miss, and she encouraged me. She was like, "Yo, we got a opening in
Nice.
printmaking. You should apply." And I was like, And before that, I was like, I'm never going back to school. I was like, all right, let me look into it. So I looked into it and decided to go to grad school. So with the body of work that I was making then still was about community, still was about me trying to understand myself through stories, through history, and through things like that. So I started using images of people and based on stories that was told to me, and I was making work from that. So it might have been like a story that my grandmother told me about her and her sister dating brothers. So I made this piece called "Courting Brothers." That old saying, courting. But I would use a lot of stories that my grandmother told me, a lot of stories that friends of the family told me, and I would recreate them. So I think even with the work that I'm doing now, it's still in that same lineage of me understanding myself through community, right? Or me understanding myself through family. So the work that I continued to make was me just kind of like reflecting on things that I had been through, things that were going on in my community. I started making this elite series based on me thinking about high school, me thinking about where I stood in high school versus people that might have grew up poor that were hung out here, and then people that grew up with a little bit more that hung out over here. And I started looking into the history of like Black communities and how this thing this is not just a thing, it happened on purpose, and it's a history of how it happened, right? So I started making work based on that, and then from there I started making these Black paintings on Black paper, and making these prints on Black paper, and it was called Black on Black, and it was based on the whole myth of Black on Black crime, but it was just based on Black things just that happen in the Black community that we don't necessarily know how it happened, but we know it happened. And I started doing my research on it and started playing around with that whole Black on Black thing. And then from there, my work started evolving more, up into my last. It was a 3-year program at Ole Miss. So my last year and a half, my work kind of evolved based on. I was doing a lecture at Prairie View, which is in Houston, which is in outside of Houston. And one of the students asked me about my work, and he was like, "Man, your work looked like an older person did it." And I was like, "Wow!" And it made me really think. Like, it made me think about that, and I started thinking about like, how do I still have this conversation while trying to, bridge the gap between the old and the new. So that's how that work kind of like evolved, with just this one student asking me this question based on saying that my work looked like an older person did it. So I started thinking about like how to still talk about things, talk about family, talk about community, but while still creating something that young people can get and older people.
Is that when hip hop started to come into your work, or has that been throughout the process?
Yeah, I think that I've always been a part of hip hop. When I was a kid, I would write these lists of all the artists. So I would watch like Yo MTV Rap and what was the other one called? Basement, Rap City.
Okay.
I would watch that, and I would write all the rappers' names down, and so I was always into hip hop. I've always been into hip hop. And I started buying the cassettes and, following the artists and stuff like that. So I've always been into hip hop, but that was a part of me bridging that gap between my interests and my work. One of the things that, we talked about, like not separating the two. So that's when I started bridging that gap between the two.
Yeah. And so where do you see it kind of going in the future? Is it still, I mean, aesthetically, you might take chances here and there, but like, is it still working on loose canvas? Is it still working on multiple scales? You're still involving. I mean, have you done self-portraits? Actually, I haven't seen any of those. Are those included in this?
I've never done any that I put out in public. Yeah. But I do have like ideas for new work that I really want to do. And I want to play around with the whole pen and pixel. You remember the pen and pixel CD covers like Master P, Cash Money, the old Cash Money. Well, it was.
I feel like I might.
Yeah, it was kind of like these real gaudy CD covers with a lot of jewels. Sometimes the hands were big. Sometimes.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
Things that did make sense, like perspective-wise, but it was in the pieces anyway. So I've been thinking more about that, like how I can use that type of graphic design, those type of things, and some other work that I want to do. So I have some ideas for some new things. I still want to make big work, but that's some of the stuff that I've been thinking about.
Okay, cool. I'm just looking at Facebook here. We had a question from Elizabeth Goodwill, who's our education director, but she wanted to know if you mentor any kids. I mean, you talk about these children, that you want to see your work. Have you ever thought of that? Is that anything that you have considered? You talk about reaching the community too, right?
Yeah. So I'm always kind of mentoring. I don't even like calling it mentoring because I feel like it's a thin line between mentor and mentee or whatever. So, because, I do a lot of giving back. I do a lot of kind of like bringing people into the fold, giving them as much of the information that I have to kind of like encourage them to do whatever they want to do. So like right now, when I moved back to Monroe in 2008, and I was kind of frustrated with the art scene here. Not seeing a lot of Black people, not that it's a huge art scene period, but not seeing a lot of Black people. So I started thinking about this thing a few years ago, and we started last year we started the Black Creative Circle here in North Louisiana, and it's just about like really being a place for artists, Black artists to meet, talk, network, and trying to build something that could add to the larger art community. So I'm always thinking about like mentoring and plans to do more things with kids. I want to do more going into the high schools and encouraging high school kids to think about art as a career. So I'm always thinking about like how I can be more of an influence to the next person, because that's what happened for me. When I moved, one of the things I didn't talk about was, in education, I think of education as all these different things, right? But I was mentored myself. When I was at Memphis College of Art, one of the guys, their name was Alonzo Davis. And he introduced me to this lady named Brenda Joysmith, who needed some help on some projects she was working on. From there, that whole thing kind of like was the catalyst to everything I wanted to do. Like seeing somebody that looked like me doing something that I like doing, and having like a nice house, a nice studio.
Successful, yeah.
this concreted for me. So she like me seeing her, meeting her, and meeting her husband kind of concreted everything for me. And I would travel with her husband to go to art events and art fairs and stuff like that. So all of this stuff kind of like really concreted like what I wanted to do.
What was her name again, real quick? What was her name again?
Brenda Joysmith.
Brenda Joysmith. Got it. Okay. Just if anyone's listening, they can look her up too. And so that's what really cemented your decision to be, or to have art as your vocation, right? To be an artist. Right. Yeah.
To think about it full time, because initially when I went to art school, I was like, I'm gonna do comic books, and I've never seen, like, I never thought of myself as being good enough to do comics. Like, to me, those dudes are like awesome, right?
They are like freehand, first time,
Right. So like, I was never on that level, but to me with them. So I was always like, I don't know, I'm not sure. So I did major in illustration, but it translated more into paintings. Mm-hmm. So with meeting her, and then being a part of that group, was that like alternative education path that I, took. Going to school 4 years to get my BFA, being a part of this artist collective, being mentored by this artist, that all was like my alternative, like, education that I kind of got. And then going to grad school, and then doing the residency thing. So I do think, as education being this ongoing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think residencies in general are fantastic. Just spaces to freely create and explore ideas, especially if you're, trying something new and you need time to create transitional work. I think that's a great time. But it sounds like that kind of year between the two, you probably, this is just an assumption, but you probably decided at that point in time that you were an artist, right? Like, you are an artist, and grad school is just another tool to get you further along in that career, right? Yeah. Awesome.
Right.
Cool.
I definitely, I think I dealt with grad school like that. I didn't deal with grad school the same way some of my other classmates dealt with it. I dealt with it as, this is just another piece of paper to get me in some extra doors that I need to get into. I'm already an artist. I don't need this piece of paper to, confirm that. I already knew that I was an artist. I was already showing. I was doing shows while I was in grad school. So this is just another thing that helped me, to get to some other places.
Yeah, no, but that credibility always helps, especially when you're applying to residencies who might not be familiar with your work too, right? It's just that little stamp of approval. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that maybe we didn't cover? Okay, so let me cover this. Your work will be at the Art Center in January, so we're very, very excited, and fingers crossed we'll get to do some kind of artist talk with you too. We'll see what the world looks like at that point in time. But right. Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to just kind of add to the conversation before we sign off?
Yeah. If they want to follow me, please follow me on Instagram at the Shell of Vitus. At the Shell of Vitus. You can follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter. My Facebook. It's hard. I have like 5,000 friends on Facebook. So, excuse me. That's not the best place to follow me. So I really encourage you to follow me on Instagram.
I just posted that in the comment section on this Facebook stream, so you guys should all follow that too. And your website is also the Shell of Vitus here too, right? Yeah. Vitus, I'm sorry. Yes, Vitus. Well, thank you so much. This was great. It's always fantastic to talk to another artist and an artist who's coming up, and coming up in terms of our exhibitions, and to really kind of get an understanding of why you're creating your work and what we'll potentially see. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone else for joining us. Oh, I think he's showing. Yes!
This is a piece I've been working on. I just have to finish up, so.
Is it just one free piece of canvas, or is it already collaged? Okay, nice. Yeah, the shadow on the neck, that is pretty incredible. Yeah, definitely fooled the eye. That's amazing. Nice. And you love painting, so the collage just kind of fuels the painting too, right? Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Right. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. We'll see you in January, and everyone follow on Instagram and check out the website.
Thanks for coming through and allowing me to do this. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Vitus.
All right. See you later.